Hi everyone. Let me see. I think this should be the photo of the week, perhaps of the month, perhaps of the year. It's really, really nice. Now, where did I keep this? Here. So now that Donald Duck is not anymore in the White House, I think we can start our lesson. I just want us to celebrate with you, well, with most of you at least, this great news. He's out. He's out. So well, we can begin a new era. I hope. I'm not saying that Biden is going to be a saint. I really doubt it. But I hope. I hope it kind of closes an era where people could mock intellectuality, where people could mock race, where they could mock gender, where they could mock just anything that was different to them, right? That's what Trump represented, in my opinion. And tribalism, we discussed this 2 weeks ago. Tribalism is something that, on a purely biological sense, there's a reason for that. It has to do with survival. But come on, we're past this Paleolithic times, okay? We should be the Homo sapiens, the wise men, and we're not. So I'm really, really happy that this chapter has been closed and the rotten orange is out. Now, we are going to paint. I've decided to paint something related to rotten oranges. I actually picked a lemon, which I'll have to find in a bit there. I might put it against a black background or something of that sort. But before we start painting, I just want to let you know that the history of art course is still, you still have 4 hours, 5 hours. By the time this video is out, you still have 4 hours to enroll. And if you go to my website, yes, www.nelson/ferreira.com, you have until midnight tonight to enroll at a discount price. You can still enroll later, but it's going to be 20% more expensive. So if you want to book now the history of art course with me, just go straight to this website, scroll down. You're going to see 2 posts, one in English and one in Portuguese. Get the one of the language you speak. So the English one, I've got lots of people booking up, both for the English and the Portuguese. And yeah, and that's it. So I'm looking forward to seeing everyone there. Let me just check who is online so we can say hi. And I see John. Hello, John. And a few other people. So if you could please comment down below so I don't just feel like all these eyes are looking and there's no interaction, no reaction. Now, another thing I would like to let you know, so another announcement, is that I'm flying again to Portugal, and I will be doing a portrait course for the Museum of Contemporary Art of Lisbon, and that should be roughly in a month's time. So whoever is on my mailing list, you will get a notification once I know the exact dates. We pushed the dates so it doesn't clash with, well, as little as possible, of course. We don't know the future, but we pushed the dates so that they don't clash too much with the quarantines, either in the UK or in Portugal or so on. It's going to be a super, super limited course. Maximum number of people, I believe it's 5. So it's going to sell out within half an hour. Once I advertise this, it's going to be gone. But if you feel like escaping after your lockdown, just come and join me in Lisbon, okay? Yeah, make sure you get a place before you come and join me in Lisbon. Like I said, it will be very limited course, very, very selective, only for a very few number of people. We have to be careful now, to make sure we're not spreading anything and any disease. So Liliana, hello. Sanzart, good evening to everyone. Hi Nelson. Sarah, you've enrolled in the History of Art course. Well done. I'll try to make sure that every Sunday or every Tuesday that you're listening to the lesson, it's really worth your time. So I'm really happy to know you'll be there. Okay, so any questions? If you, yeah, just go ahead. I know there's always a delay, so I will read in a few minutes if there is any question. And meanwhile, because I've shown you the image of the year, I think. Let me show you again. It's just such a pleasure. You know, come on, let's not be political. It's just such a pleasure to finally announce that he's out. And I love this type of citrusy images. You know, the rotten orange is out. So I've decided to perhaps paint a lemon. Not, I don't have oranges in the studio. I have one last lemon before I fly to Lisbon. And the reason being that many of my students have a really hard time managing the yellow color. So yellow, let me think. I'd say yellow or red, orange as well. But so let's say the warm colors, yellow, red, orange, you know, the warm colors are the hardest ones to manage, all the way from the super, super light pale tints all the way down to the darkest shades. And they're extremely difficult to manage because they get warped very easily. I'll have to explain. First, I'll explain with words, and then we will demonstrate with paint. Essentially, the moment you darken yellow, it stops being yellow. Okay? So there is no such thing as dark yellow in painting. It cannot exist. Let me be a bit more blunt. It's physically impossible for the human eye to see dark yellow. It's a color that does not exist. If you darken the yellow dark enough so it becomes dark, it either shifts towards olive green or it shifts towards brown. And none of them resemble yellow anymore. Okay? So you do not have dark yellow. And the same happens with red. The problem of red is to lighten it up. The moment you lighten it up, it shifts towards pink, and pink does not resemble red anymore. So psychologically, it's not the same color in our head. You know, when you look at pink, it looks so distinctively different from red that we could claim, it's a bold claim, but we could claim that it's not the same color anymore. It's not the same family, correct? Now, you don't seem to have that problem with the other hues. A very pale blue, it's still blue in our head. A very dark blue also looks like blue. Same with the greens. A very pale tint of green, it's still green. That's what we call it. A very dark green still reads as green to the human eye. Do you understand the problem with the warm colors? So when you have yellows, oranges, and reds, there is an issue the moment you try to lighten them or darken them. I'd say the problem with yellow is to darken. It gets warped straight away. And the problem with red is to lighten it because it gets pinkish and also it gets cooler. It gets bluer. It's like you add white to the red, and surprise, you end up with a pale purple, with pale mauve. It doesn't even look like red anymore, okay? So in a second, I will demonstrate that. And of course, tonight's exercise will be related to this. I would like you to paint a whole image just in shades of yellow, nothing else, okay? So from pale yellow to the darkest yellow. So homework, let's paint an image only in shades of yellow. And I would like you to do it tonight once we start the exercises. So what's, oh, the t-shirt. Well, so Sans Arts, can you read this? It's actually an IQ test. Let's see, guys, let's see who can read this t-shirt. Let me put it a bit nearer. Let me see who can read it or not. This is an IQ test, okay? And it applies to American politics. It applies to many things. This is an IQ test. If you can read it, please type it down below. In a few minutes, I'll have a look. I love this t-shirt. It's something that I occasionally wear when I go to grab a coffee somewhere. But today I thought it's related to the lesson, you know. So I think I'm gonna get aha. So Nark, she got it. You're quick. You're intelligent. Well done. So yeah, as it's written here, the measure of intelligence is the ability to change. And then signed Albert Einstein. And the measure of intelligence is indeed the ability to change. Arguably, my live streams tend to be all over, everywhere. It's a bit like, you know, all over the top, and there's a bit of this, there's a bit of the other, there's a bit, without justifying, but you guys remember, it's because I want this to be absolutely spontaneous. So absolutely unprepared and absolutely spontaneous, you know, on the fly. But what I'm also trying to do is that I'm trying to give you a random, when I say random, is between, you know, quotation marks, because it's not really random, but I'm trying to give you random looking is better. I'm trying to give you random looking different sources of information and different bits that will influence you, so that I can push your artistic intelligence all across the spectrum, you know. I'm sometimes I push it left, other days I push it right, and then I push it up or down or further back or towards you, or, you know, I'm trying to make you pliable. And the only way to do that is, at least that I'm aware, the only way that I'm aware that this works is by desensitizing you to constant change. Does this make sense? So every week, you know, something else is coming up, and it's on purpose. I want you to be flexible, because the last thing I want to do, the very, very last thing I want to do is to show you a method, and this is how you paint. It's so dull and it's so unartistic. This is not exactly an art lesson. It's more like an artistic lesson. All right, because we are combining so many different elements into this class. But yeah, so the ability to change is highly linked with a very high IQ. We need to learn how to change. We need to adapt. We can't stay the same. It's not going to work. Actually, the whole world is now changing at a very high pace, and we absolutely must adapt. Must. It's not an option anymore. All right? Those who don't adapt are going to suffer greatly in the next few months. Huge amounts of pain are coming towards those who do not adapt. So yeah, all this big lecture just to say that I love this t-shirt, and I hope you love it too. Let me check a few more comments down below. You will not focus on the lemon. Now you know the answer to the t-shirt, so you can focus on the lemon. Now I have here a few more comments, which is, I'm a slow typist. Hi, Jack. You might be a slow typist, but you got it quickly, didn't you? You got it immediately. So very high IQ. Welcome as well to the lesson. Now, I have here Liz Almeida. Hola. We have people from all over the world. I didn't get ability. Albert Einstein, indeed. Now, I've got John said you just watched a lovely YouTube from the Frick about Chardin on YouTube. Cocktails with a curator. Liliana, how can you read that? Let me check. The. Can you see the? Let me just get the mirror so I can see where I'm pointing. The measure of intelligence, yeah, is the ability to change. Albert Einstein. Can you see that now? Because our brain is able to pick up patterns even when it's reading random symbols. Now, in terms of codes, linguistically speaking, this is all wrong. Okay? Technically, you shouldn't be able to read this, but our brain is so pliable. We're not very intelligent as a species. We're not. Come on, let's just forget that. It's a myth. We are not intelligent, but we have specific types of intelligence that seem to be pretty good. And one of them is this. The human brain can decode even really strange codified messages. Like during the Second World War, you had these people that could read what the Nazis were talking about. Although they were all writing down in codes, you could decipher the codes. It seems like the human brain is pretty good at that. It's quite decent. Now we've got milliseconds, yes. And Breda, hi Breda, good to see. Yes, Albert Einstein, indeed. He was a clever guy. I never bothered to check if he really said this or not, because there's so many false claims that Einstein said this, Einstein said that, and then it's not true. I don't know if this was an Albert Einstein or not, but yeah, I like the message and I like the t-shirt. Now I had another message here from Liliana, which I couldn't see anymore. It just disappeared. And it was to say that it will be in the... So the portrait course will be indeed in the Museum of Contemporary Art of Lisbon. People from Lisbon were called alfacinhas, little lettuces would be the translation, because we're very soft and weak, capital. It's like Londoners a bit. So we're called little lettuces. And little lettuces call this museum the Museum of Chiado. Chiado is the neighborhood, is the district where the museum sits. Hardly anyone calls it the Museum of Contemporary Art. We call it the Museum of Chiado, Museu do Chiado. But the official name of the museum is the Museum of Contemporary Art, Museu Nacional de Arte Contemporânea. And that's where the portrait course will take place. You will all get a notification once the dates are on. So I think we are ready to start painting. And I'm just going to quickly set up an easel so I can bring the camera further down. And I will also move the lights a bit nearer to you. If you have any questions, just type them on the box below. And if for some reason I don't see it, because there's going to be a lot of stuff, you can type it again after a while, after a few minutes. If you feel I should have answered and I didn't. Now, another thing that I'll be doing in Portugal, of course, is I'll be painting a lot of landscapes live. You would say I'm dining al fresco, but I will not be dining. Well, I'll be dining too, but mainly I'll be painting. And when you paint al fresco, we don't say al fresco. In technical slang, we call it plein air, or plein air, or plein air. In the English would say plein air, and the Americans. It's a French expression, plein air, which means you're painting on the landscape, pretty much under the weather. But Portugal is renowned worldwide for having an amazing climate, so I don't think I'm going to suffer that much with rain. Although it's winter, you still get these beautiful crisp blue skies. The temperatures in Lisbon might have dropped to about 16 degrees Celsius, usually not much lower than that, so it's great, you know. Even during the winter, you can just go and paint. And this time I'm going to paint mostly landscapes, and I've got some commissions to do, which are going to be nocturnal paintings. So I'm going to paint landscapes at night. Don't ask me how I'm going to do it. I'm still trying to figure out a solution, because I'll be painting live at night. You heard me well. You heard me well. A trick that I will try. I don't think this is gonna work, but God, it's gonna be a nightmare. But you know Alexa, or whatever is her name on the iPhone. Alexa replies to voice commands. So I think what I'll be doing is I'm going to put Alexa on my. I'll put my iPhone on my forehead. I've got one of those. It's like a helmet that you can clip your phone to. And then I will say, Alexa, turn torch on. The torch will come, but I will leave the torch at the lowest, weakest setting. So it's very weak light. And in front of the torch, I was doing some testing and it seems to work. In front of the torch, I will use a neutral gray filter. So the light is even weaker. If you know, it's like putting sunglasses in front of your torch, and put the torch as weak as possible, and then put a dark lens in front of it. The idea is just for you to barely see the colors on the palette, so I can mix my tones and hues and so on more or less correctly. Paint. Then Alexa, turn torch off. Turn off the torch. Darkness. Allow the eyes to adjust again. And then after a few minutes, after I've adjusted, after I've seen what I want to do, Alexa, turn on the torch and quickly paint it. Then turn off the torch again. Initially, that's what I'm going to try to do. I hope it works. Wish me luck, okay? So I'm going now to move the camera much nearer. Just give me 1 second. And we are going to paint. Meanwhile, please have your yellow paints ready, because we are making an image exclusively in shades of yellow, okay? Please have your yellow paints ready. That's what I would like you to do, if you can. And here we go. Let me just quickly, more or less, straighten this up. There's a little lemon. Can you see the little lemon on the table? Let me just tilt this down a bit further. And I've noticed that sometimes the camera just doesn't focus. Why is that? Come on, camera. Focus. Ah, yes. I think now it's focused. Before we start painting, there's another book I would like you to see. This is an amazing book. It was written in Brazil in the 60s. It's called Flicts. It's kind of, you can't really find this book anymore. It will cost you like £200 or more, because it's an historical curiosity. But the idea of this book is that there is a color called Flicts, a color that does not exist. And again, come on, camera, focus. Ah, silly camera, is not focusing at all. Come on, come on. Sorry, guys, this is just pathetic. I don't understand. This is meant to be a really good camera. It's not. I'm really, really upset. The brand is called Logitech, and this is their top of the range, and it's just not working. So if you guys work for Logitech, or if you know anyone that does, please tell them that their cameras are rubbish. Okay? Lots of publicity, but then no reaction. But the idea is that this color, it's a color that does not exist. It's trying to find its place in the world. So the color didn't have the strength of the red. nor the endless light of yellow, and so on, so on, so on. It's a beautiful book. It talks about rainbows. It talks about, beautiful countries, beautiful places, and this color never fits in. And then at the very, very, very end, they tell us a secret that only astronauts know, is that from a very, very, very short distance, tiny distance, the moon is flicked. So the color of the moon is this color that does not exist. And I love this book because the whole purpose of this book was to tell children that it didn't matter how special they were, how different they were from other children. We are all special and we are all flicts. So anyway, just a little bit of gossip. I think this could be a really nice book. I'm just going to take a random brush, and I want to paint this lemon so we can discuss the color of yellow as we go into the shadows. Just take a few brushes, this will do. And I will sit the yellow on top of a black background so you guys can see what happens to the color yellow as it darkens. Let me create now a stronger spotlight. And I think I'll have to drop considerably the easel. So please just give me another second, okay? It's worthwhile because I want you to see the shadows of the lemon, not just the light bits of the lemon. That doesn't make any sense. The shadows too. Okay, this could kind of work. Kind of. Can everyone see this? Let me just check the comments and then we will start painting. Yeah, boot to Logitech, indeed. It's pathetic. They cost a lot of money. They promise, they tell everyone, oh, this is the best webcam in the world, blah, blah, blah. It's not true. It's just not true. Now, I'm also going to attempt something live that I want you to see, which is to paint wet on wet directly on the paper. So there will be no. I'm just literally going to paint wet on wet on the paper. There will be no palette, okay? And first things first, let me just move the light slightly off. First things first is that, again, I'm standing way, way, way higher than the camera, so I can't really see what this camera is doing. I'm going to bring this on front. I think this is okay. I think this is okay. And I'm totally going to, I'm not going to care at all about the shape because it's impossible. It's literally impossible for me to see what you guys are seeing. Let me just get things out of the way on camera. It's totally impossible. This is looking like how can I explain this? I'm painting from above and you guys are looking from beneath, but it doesn't matter. And what I'll do is I'll keep this painting more expressionistic than the ones I usually do, because that will justify a lot of leeway and a lot of excuses. So essentially, let me bring this slightly higher up so it's not totally different from what I see. but it's still going to be quite different, you know? It's just impossible for me. But then you don't see the shadow. And I really want you to see the shadow. Today's lesson is about this shadow. It's crucial that you see the shadow. Yeah, it's absolutely crucial. So it doesn't matter. I'm going to leave this in a way that you can see the shadow of the lemon. Okay, that shows the shadow. And that's quite important because that's what we are going to paint today. But remember, the shape, it's going to be totally different because I'm dealing exclusively now with color. And one thing that you can see is that there's a lot of reflections on the paint. Sorry, guys, this is not as easy as it seems, you know? There's always a problem when you paint live. And one of them is that the angle of the paint is creating reflections. Lovely. Okay, that's a bit better. Now, the first thing is that this yellow is just a symbol, because if you compare it to the yellow on the lemon, it's totally different. Can you see that? The real yellow of this lemon has to be darker and browner. So what I suggest we do is I'm just going to take a little bit of yellow ochre, and I'm literally just going to rub it up here. And I said I was going to work wet on wet, which is true. So I'm just literally going to smear some paint wet on wet. I just added a bit of water, which is off camera, so you can't see that. But to be able to spread the paint. And I'm fully going to ignore anything more than this. Now, next thing is the color itself. And what did I tell you before? Just washing my brush off camera. What did I tell you before is that if you mix black with the yellow, let's make an experiment here. So you've got black, and then you've got the yellow. And if you mix the two, it gives you a positive green. So I'm going to ask the question to all my students online, and you should know this from the lesson. How do I fight this green? Look at the color wheel, and what's the opposite color of green? Let's darken this even further just to show you what would happen. Let's use the wrong color, okay? I'm going to use now the wrong color to paint the shadow. And remember, because I'm seeing from above, I see a different shadow shape, very different to the one you see. You guys see probably the shadow coming under the lemon and so on. I really can't. I only see a sliver because I'm painting from above. This camera is lower. I can see this. I can see a bit of that, and this. So this is the wrong color, okay? It's way too green, and it just doesn't make any sense in terms of color. Like I was saying at the start of the lesson, when you paint like that, they don't relate. It seems like the yellow has nothing to do with this green. So how are you going to create dark yellow so that it still reads as being part of the very same lemon? Let me check if there's any comments down below, because I know some of you will know the answer. Yes, indeed. Some people answered correctly, and the answer is red. Absolutely. So the opposite color of green is red. I'm just going to take a little bit of red, and now let's see what happens. I just added a drop of water because the paint is drying fast. Let's see what happens. Oops, that was way too much red. When you add, that was way too much red. Let me just clean the brush. When this happens, it's best to start afresh. Let's see what happens when we contaminate this dark green with a little bit of red. All right. Can you see that? Now we turn browner and it's not green anymore. So like I was saying at the start of the lesson, in painting, it's impossible to have dark yellow. You either have green, olive green, or you have brown. Because in this case, brown is more correct than green. I'm going to stick to the brown to paint these shades. So again, very quickly, we just clean the brush. Let's make more quantity. So we are now creating a color. Let's make this a bit lighter. It's shifting to green already. Can you see that? So let's add a touch of red. And notice that the lighter you get, it's becoming more and more like the yellow ochre. So essentially, yellow ochre is dark yellow, but without going green. So if you want to paint an image just in shades of yellow, I recommend you have bright yellow. Then you will need yellow ochre, which will be the shade of that. And then you can go even darker with another color similar to this, which is called raw amber. But avoid the greenish tone, okay? Just get a very dark brown, essentially. But you can paint with this color. So because this is the same as yellow ochre, pretty much, I'm going to use yellow ochre as well in our mix, just to create a paint. All right. So there we go. And I'm going to start covering the previous layer, because that was just way too wrong and we don't need that. So I'm going to start covering the previous layer with this yellow ochre. And can you see? The paint just seems to sit better as a color. There's a much better sense that we're still talking about yellow. Before we weren't. Before it was literally a... Okay. And now we need the intermediate tones. So this yellow ochre needs to mix to create slightly lighter tones. So we can start making the colors gel. And like I've told you, I'm going to paint wet on wet. Please ignore everything you see, because what I see is different. I'm going to paint wet on wet, and I'll be doing the mixes on the lemon itself. And you are creating very, very strong blends between dark colors and light colors. So these are some of the intermediate tones. Okay. Then wash your brush. From time to time, just make sure to keep the color clean. You need to wash your brush. Create an intermediate tone and you can go over. I have no clue what you guys are seeing, because you're seeing from underneath. No clue. I might have a look into the computer in a second when I go back to check if there's any comments down below, and then I'll be up to a shock. Actually, let me see now. What are you seeing at the computer? Oh my goodness me! It's totally different. Your point of view and your angle, totally different. It's just absolutely crazy. Now, when it comes to, I think what I'll do now is I'm going to create a context. The lemon just moved, but I'm going to use some black to create a context down here below. I hope you're all painting with shades of yellow, it's really nice if you do, because then we can talk about the same thing instead of talking about different things. Now, from where I am, which is higher than the camera you're looking from, I can see black all around the lemon. So that's exactly what I'm going to do. Let me just get some black out. I'm going to use 2 shades of black at least. I'm going to use this black because it covers well. It's a lamp black, you know. I quite like lamp black because it covers well. But then I will use some jet black for the deeper shadows, just because it's deeper, you know, it's blacker. But for now, I'm using the lamp black just because it covers better. You know, it's a good black to have. Now, checking the shape of the lemon, from where I am, I can see some clear zigzags on the shape and some little innies and outies. Because lemons are never, ever, ever just ovals, correct? Okay, this is a nice base color, just to get us kind of started in the shape. And now I need to trim. So essentially, some of these zigs will have to be cut. The paint is still not grabbing because it's the first layer. There you go. But see how this black dries lighter? So it's very dark and even brownish while it's wet, this lamp black. And then as it dries as a bluish gray. So when you're painting, okay, just bear that in mind, that colors shift considerably between wet and dry. And that's normal. That's just something we learn to deal with as we paint. Okay, so enough of this for now. Oh, I like this greenish hue that got mixed into the paint. And now that we have a backdrop, I'll get back to the lemon shape in a second. I'm going to use the jet black for the blackest blacks. Let me get this back here. This poor lemon has been rolling so much that it's never in the same place. And this is going to be the blackest black. It's the jet black. And from where I am, the jet black starts roughly here. I'd say around here. It goes around that way. It comes up all the way till there. For sure, you can't see that because you're so much lower. Your shadow, for sure, ends way, way, way lower than what I can see from where I am. Okay, so let me block this in. It's going to be kind of. It's going to be nice to be able to paint landscapes at night. I'm very curious about how it's going to look, because that's something I've never done in my life, you know, to paint totally at night without being able to see what's really happening. So I'll have to rely a lot on visual memory and other sensations of that sort. Okay, so we're starting to get a little shape. Now, like I've told you before, the paint dries considerably different. So I think it's time to give another coat to the lemon and redefine some of the edges, and also create, you know, just create all sorts of different lights, shadows, and tones. The shadow, now it's way too light. It was meant to have dried way darker, but it didn't. And that's That's actually something I'm doing on purpose. I'm kind of just mixing colors on the fly as I go, because I want you to remember that nothing stays the same in this type of acrylic palette, or gouache in this case. We're using acrylic gouache. For those who want really to know, I quite like this brand, Turner Acrylic Paints. And again, I'm not sure if the camera is focusing. The best camera in the world, so they say. Ah, yes, it did. Good camera. Turner acrylic paints are great, but, as always, there is no such thing as a brand that is good all across the spectrum. Some colors are not light fast. Bad job, Turner. Some of your colors fade within weeks. So my students, my dear students, you must learn. You must absolutely learn to read the labels before you buy anything, and not only buy light fast paints, okay? Only buy light fast. There's no reason why you should get colors that fade. Okay, so I'm going now quite dark, and I'm going to start trimming some of these corners with a quite dark brown. And you guys saw what I've done. I've mixed yellow ochre and black with a touch of red. Why was the red there? You already know. So it doesn't turn green. Okay, so I'm going to use this really dark brown for all these lower masses. Next shade. Look what happens. You are starting to get a color that is a little bit too dull. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to add some colorful colors. I'm going to add some more yellow ochre and red to increase the chroma. Can you see up there was kind of grayish greenish, and down here is a more colorful color. A colorful color, does that exist? I think it does. And again, all of these shades and paints and colors that I'm using, it's essentially to help describe space. So I'm not even bothered to try to get the exact color. That doesn't really matter. What matters, and what my students always know, is that I am getting the values. So the values between light and dark must be quite accurate. They don't have to be perfect. Nothing in this world is perfect anyway, but they must read as a convincing shade. So again, just a little touch of red so that the color doesn't get too crazy. And we start repainting the next hue and tone. And with this very same color, you can even go up here and create some little accents of reflected light. Okay, because they make sense in terms of color. They make total sense. Now, from where I am, the shadow goes around that way at the top. I'm just going to create a little sliver later on because it's of a lighter shade and tone. Just create here a better transition. Sorry, I keep bumping into the camera. Let me put a bit more paint. And all the mixes are being done on the painting, so I'm not using really. I mean, this is a palette if you want, but it's a palette on the same place as the painting. Now, I don't like this tone at all. It needs more yellow ochre. Perhaps even a little touch of red. Yeah, that's better. That's better. And up here, so I see a sliver of shadow coming around. And then I see some reflected lights back there, which I will do later, because I want to show you first something with the camera. I definitely see some shadow going around that way from where I am. And finally, I'm just going to quickly repaint the whole lemon because he needs more yellow ochre anyway. Come on, yellow. Ah, there you go. It almost went. So this is essentially, it's practically pure yellow ochre. And now as we go lighter, I'm going to start to mix some lemon yellow, but let's mix directly on the painting, okay? Let's mix directly on the painting to create a more vibrant, vivid effect where the strokes are left. So as you paint wet on wet, it's crucial that you learn not to disturb the paint. So it's crucial that you learn that if you give a stroke and another next to it and another, kind of leave it. Don't apply 2, 3, 4, 5 times the same place because you're gonna lose the streakiness that is characteristic of wet on wet, and that is just so nice to do when you're painting in such a fashion, such a matter, such a way. Now I'm going to do a little quick pause. Just gonna slightly raise the camera and step back. Now I can leave it like this for now, and then you guys can chat. Now let me see. John says that plein air is too chilly for it. Some people paint plein air in the North Pole. I've seen it. You know, I've seen it, John. Now let me see if any more relevant comments. Easel, I need an easel, Barrett palette, and a seat. Yes, and a very good jacket. If you paint outdoors, make sure you don't catch the flu. When you hold closer, Boo Boo, Logitech, love that book. Yes, I can see lemon fine Trump. Okay, so I think we're all more or less. We kind of caught up with the lesson. Not many comments. If you guys could post me the images that you're creating, so then we can have a look later. Now, next step. Reflected lights. Let me see if I can show you this. I'll move the camera. I'll move the set, actually. I'll move the set so you can see. Reflected lights are surprisingly high in chroma. So there's a lot of orange light in the shadow that I totally disregarded initially because I'm just creating a block in. But as you can see, this shadow is super, super, super orange. And why is that? Partially, it's because the table is so red. Partially. So let me try to find you a different backdrop so you guys can understand what I'm talking about in here. What I am talking about in here is that if you change the color of the backgrounds, it moves from orange shadow. Look at this bit here, okay? Keep looking at this top bit of the shadow. And now I'm going to drop the blue paper and notice how the shadow turned green. And when I remove the paper, it's orange again. Does this make sense? So the big lesson to learn here is that the color of the light is the color of the object. The color of the light bits is the color of the lemon. The color of the shadow, not. The color of the shadow is usually going to be a mix between the color of the lemon and the color of the background, whatever that is. So if the background is red, the color of this shadow is going to be the yellow of the lemon, dark yellow, so something of this sort, like I did in the painting, you know, a dark yellow, but filled up with a lot of red. So yellow and red make orange. Does this make sense to you? It's very important that you learn this. I need to speak directly to you, so let me push the camera out. Let me push the camera out. And essentially, what I'm trying to tell you from a very close up, I don't know if this camera is focusing. I bet it is now. If it's wrinkles and pimples and so on, the camera will focus, but not when you're painting. Essentially, what I'm trying to say is that any object in the light, it shows its true color in the light, not in the highlights. The highlights are the reflections on the surface of the light. It's these lighter specks. The highlights, learn this and learn this today. Write it down. Write it down. The highlights are going to be similar to the color of the light. So if the light is bluish, these highlights would have been bluish, but not the lemon. The lemon would still be yellow pretty much, unless it's very blue light. We're not talking about extremes here. We're talking about bluish, okay? So imagine the light is pinkish. Tell me, what color would the yellow be and what color would the highlights be? Please write it down. But you got it right. The answer would be the lemon would still be yellow, but the reflections, the highlights would be pinkish, okay? And then you've got a terminator. You've got zigzag, zigzag, that divides light from shadow. If you look at the shadow shape, and just at the shadow shape, the color of the shadow is the color of the object, darkened. And you've already learned that to darken yellow, you must add a little touch of red, otherwise it turns green. So it's the color of the object darkened, plus with the dominance of the color of the background. If the background is red, then the shadow will be reddish. If the background, if this towel is, if this thing was green, then the shadow would have been green. What I'm trying to tell you, and let's conclude, is that the color of the object only shows in the light areas of the object. That's rule number one, and not in the highlights. So even the highlights don't represent the color of the object, just the light areas. Okay? And I'm going to do a close-up so you guys can see what happens to the lemon when you change all the colors. Let's do a little experiment. I'm going to put now the lemon on top of the red background and just see how spectacularly orange the shadow is going to be. It's just incredible, right? Then I'm going to use this little book, Flicts, to create backgrounds of different colors, because there's several. I'm going to use now a yellow background and look at the color of the shadow of the lemon. The shadow practically disappears because the shadow is practically of the same color as the light, because the shadow is full of bright yellow. Does that make sense? Now let's use red. Look at the color of the shadow in the lemon. It's now bright red. It's brighter than the towel I was using before, you know, the tablecloth. Let's use blue now. Look at the color of the shadow in the lemon. It turned green because it's yellow and blue. Where can you see the true color of the lemon? Only in the lights. And I repeat, never in the highlights, just in the lights themselves. That's where the true color exists. Nowhere else. Okay? Another example, just for the fun now, because you've learned there's even a rainbow. You can't really see that much, but there's even a rainbow effect, you know, where you can have parts of the shadow going green and other parts going red, as over there. More examples. You've got, this rainbow will be bigger and probably easier to see. No, not really. It's not really showing in this image. We're too far. But I want you to really understand this today. In here, it should be pretty clear. So, sorry. Look at this. Look how part of the shadow is totally red and part of the shadow is yellow. Just because the background, whatever is behind, is tinting the shadow. Okay? So you need to learn this today. The only parts of the object where you can see the true color, the very only part is only in the lights, nowhere else, not in the darks, okay? Because the darks, the shadows, can change so quickly just based on context. Now, enough of all of this talking, and I'm just going to quickly put the camera back so we can have a long chat. Let me see this. I'm just going to quickly set this up so you guys can chat now. Have a quick gossip, and then I will be with you in a second. Okay. Just see which comments we have in here, and then we're going to conclude the lesson. Oh, Sanzart, you know this book? This is a great book, you know? It's a classic from Brazil. Yeah, Ziraldo wrote it. It became legendary. And I managed to get this copy secondhand. This is a very old print. I think it's from 1969 or something of that sort. And it's a surprise, but yes, 1969, but this one was published in 1973. This is a little surprise, but my tiny niece, she's going to receive this as a present. And once I fly into Portugal, I will take this book with me, and I'll be reading it for her. I couldn't get the Brazilian edition, but I got the English translation. I will use this book to teach her some English. That's going to be lovely, you know. Great book indeed. Now we have Raquel said Trump 2020. Well, I doubt it, Raquel. I think he's gone, you know. I'm not going to say that Biden will be much better. We don't know yet. We really don't know. He might even start a war. The only thing I liked about Trump, and this I liked, was that he was so self-obsessed. He was so corrupt, him and his family, that they were way too busy doing their own deals to actually get involved at war. And unfortunately, the US has got a tradition of war. It's just a fact, you know. So I'm not going to say that Biden will be necessarily much better, but I am relieved that idiot is out of the White House. What an idiot, you know. And Trump, God, that shows the state of the US. And like a friend of mine was saying, it's quite amazing that the US claims to be the world's #1 technological country, and then they have the most primitive voting system. Absolutely primitive. It's Paleolithic. Come on, 4 or 5 days down the line, and you still don't know who's the president? How pathetic. Any nation on earth knows on the very same night, you know. It's just so ridiculous the way the votes are counted in the US. It's so, don't even get me started. Like my friend Diana said, and I love her sense of humor. She said, 4 days later, and you don't even know who's the president. And then she said, in my country, Slovakia, we already know who's the winner even 4 days before. You know, and that's true. It's just pathetic, the whole thing. Now we've got yes, green shadow. Lemon would have blackish shadow. So Sanzart asks a very good question. If I was painting sitting down, so as low as the camera, would the lemon have a black shadow? Yes, there would have been a sliver of blackness, which would not be part of the lemon itself, but it would have been, oops, I'm just dropping all the brushes, but let me show you this. It would have been where the lemon sits on the black background. So there is a little line of black, a kind of a black edge differentiating the two. Yes, and that would have been pitch black. But of course, because I was looking from above, the shape of the shadow was not going underneath the lemon. Same with the shape of the shadow in the lemon itself. Like I could see, because now when I look at the screen, I could see that you guys saw a shadow shape that was distinctively different from the one I was seeing from above. Of course, because it's like looking at a hand. How does it look like seen from here or seen from there? Same object, same shape, rotate the angle, totally different shape. Same with the lemon. It's just less shocking, you know. With a hand, you can really see that as it rotates even just a bit, the whole shape changes. Now we have Liz Almeida says, I'm delighted with these effects. Yes, something I love about painting a la prima, wet on wet, and not mixing the colors, is that you get these really lovely streaks of paint. You know, the streakiness animates the painting. This is just the first layer. Of course, I could make it way more complex and way more beautiful. And I didn't have time this time to play between sharp and blurry edges, which is something that I recommend you always do when you're painting a la prima. Because if you play between sharp and blur, you can get this really 3D, very powerful visual effect for your paintings. And now finally, wow, this is so much fun, different backgrounds. Indeed, as you change the background, everything changes in shadow. So last question for the group. I've got a small group today, but last question. What color is the shadow of any object? It's a mix between the color of the object and, please write it down, I want to see it. What a lucky little girl. Yes, my niece, she's gonna be, she will like the book for sure. The US still use non-electric kettles. It baffles me. Yes, I agree. You know, it's all very silly. All very silly. And let's not even forget that the elections in the US at the moment, they seem to be at the total mercy of public opinion, whatever that is, uninformed public opinion. So Americans, I mean, it's a country on the verge of collapse. That's the problem. It seems like there are two nations in the US. The coastal towns, which had access to education, and they're much more multinational. You've got this confluence of ideas, almost this clash of different cultures, and they seem to exchange some thoughts or some beliefs. But then you have rural America where, whoa, things are really backwards. And I've been to both places. When I visited the US, I was utterly shocked at the lack of culture of most people. And it's not their fault really. Well, partially it is, because nowadays you've got access to information anywhere online. You just need to type and you find it. So I'm trying to say that there are two countries, and one of them isn't good, and you guys know which one it is. They're racist, they're macho, they seem to have this entitlement. The worst of all is that America now is divided by tribalism. So tribalism just took hold of the nation, and there isn't rational thought, there isn't real argumentation. No, they have insult, or rumors. They spread rumors, like all those stupid conspiracy theories that God, Pizzagate, whatever. What a bunch of idiots. You have to be an idiot to believe in those stories. And yet in America, it seems they abound. I'm puzzled. Okay? I just want to leave you with one thought, which is usually what happens in America tends to happen in the UK 3 or 4 years later. I've seen this pattern. So just brace yourselves, because get ready for a bumpy ride. I think what's happening in America will happen in the UK. It's already happening. But not as bad as up there in the US. But the US now is on the verge of a civil war, just because people want to believe that the elections were rigged. They weren't rigged. The guy was an idiot. They weren't rigged. He should have lost. I just can't believe that 70 million people voted Trump. Come on. What a bunch of loonies out there in the States. It drives me nuts, Putin must be laughing. He was very good for Russia. And just Google who has been paying for Trump's debts. By the way, Trump is poorer than any of you, because his debts amounts to almost $400 million. Okay? Google it. Reputable newspapers have spoken about this repeatedly. Trump's debts amounts to about $400 million. He's totally bankrupt. He's living on credit, like a lot of those that believe in the American dream. And who has been paying for Trump's debts? Russians and Chinese. Why? They've been covering up Trump. Why? Google that. Stop being a little puppet, when you go and vote in the US. So I'm going to... So John says that Grayson Perry had 2 programs about the US, and it's very much what I'm saying. Thanks, John. I don't know those programs, but I'll have a look. And of course, Trump is a puppet. Not just Trump. A lot of the politicians, and this is not a political lesson, but I like sometimes to argue politics. None of the politicians has got the power of the top oligarchs worldwide. None. So just the guy from Amazon alone, he's probably much more powerful than Trump. And we're talking real power here. We're not talking political, symbolical power. Politicians have absolutely no power over their countries. Not anymore. It's large corporations that run the economy. And if things don't go the way that those corporations want or like, the politician shall be removed from cabinet. It has nothing to do with... As a politician, you just don't have the power. How can you? You're too weak. You don't have the budget. You don't have the money. Countries are bankrupt. Nations are bankrupt. It's large organizations that have the money nowadays. Again, I'm going to leave you with one documentary, which I've advertised many times. I think it's the best ever. The best ever. Look, if you watch these 2 programs, and if you follow the channel of Sam Vaknin, Vaknin, is a professor of economy and a professor of psychology. By the way, if you follow his channel, you don't need to follow any other channel on YouTube, including my own. Okay, you can say, "By Nelson, we found some Vaknin." It's the guy with an IQ of 190, and practically everything he says, I think, is spot on. Some Vaknin, but also watch the terrific documentaries that were made by Adam Curtis. So Adam, and then Curtis, Curtis. He's done many documentaries. They're not all equally good. I highly recommend The Century of the Self, Hypernormalization, and Bitter Lake. Okay? The Century of the Self, Hypernormalization, and Bitter Lake. 3 documentaries that I think should be compulsory at university level. You shouldn't be able to finish with a BA or an MA or a PhD without watching these documentaries. They're BBC documentaries when the BBC used to be great. Make the BBC great again. It's not going to be Trump. And they're just fabulous pieces of information. You can find them on YouTube, or you can find at least one of them you can find on BBC iPlayer. Otherwise, just go to Adam Curtis Documentaries. You've got his channel there, and just type Hypernormalization, watch it. The Century of the Self, watch it. And Bitter Lake. Each document. Okay? Now, remind you that next week there will be no live stream, and I will not be doing live streams for the next 7 weeks. So I shall see you in 2 months' time, 2 months and a half. Try to catch up with the previous videos, the videos you have not seen yet. Meanwhile, I'm going to give a little pause to this YouTube channel because I'll be running the history of art lessons, which I have to do anyway. And occasionally, I might post 1 or 2 things onto this channel. But if you guys want to join the History of Art course, again, I'm just going to leave the website. And you still have a few hours for the early bird discount. It's now 8:30. So for the next 3 hours, roughly 3 hours and a half until midnight, you'll get 20% off if you join the History of Art course. Otherwise, I shall see you in 7 weeks' time. That's about 2 months, okay? I shall see you then, and please do catch up with the previous videos. More importantly, watch those documentaries I've told you by Adam Curtis, or follow Sam Vaknin because he's great. He explains these phenomena much better than I could because he's a proper professor of economics. I am not. I just have an interest. But I'm not, it's not my expertise. Thanks very much. I'm just quickly going to see if there's any other comments that I should reply to, and then we'll probably end this lesson. Yeah, so it's all done for today. You guys take care, okay? Bye-bye. Ciao, and keep painting. Goodbye.